Reference sources: primary, secondary, and tertiary sources of information. Introduction. Reference sources are essential tools that help users locate, verify, and understand information efficiently. They are designed for consultation rather than continuous reading and are widely used in libraries, educational institutions, and research organizations. Reference sources provide quick access to facts, data, and background information and guide users toward more detailed resources. Information sources are generally classified into primary, secondary, and tertiary sources based on the nature, originality, and level of interpretation of the information they contain. Each category serves a distinct purpose in the process of information creation, dissemination, and use. Concept of reference sources. Reference sources are information resources that provide concise, authoritative, and reliable information on various subjects. They assist users in obtaining specific facts, definitions, explanations, or references to other information sources. Examples include dictionaries, encyclopedias, bibliographies, indexes, directories, handbooks, and manuals. The primary objective of reference sources is to facilitate efficient information retrieval. Primary sources. Meaning and definition. Primary sources are original records or first-hand accounts of events, research, observations, or experiences. They present information in its original form without interpretation, evaluation, or summarization by others. Primary sources provide direct evidence and are considered the most authentic sources of information. Characteristics of primary sources. Original and first-hand in nature. Created by individuals directly involved in the event, research, or activity. Contain raw data and original findings. Provide detailed and specific information. Serve as the foundation for further research and analysis. Examples of primary sources. Research articles and scientific papers. Theses and dissertations. Historical documents and manuscripts. Diaries, letters, and autobiographies. Government records and official reports. Original literary works such as novels, poems, and plays. Interviews and speeches. Laboratory reports and experimental data. Example: a scientific research article presenting the results of an original experiment is a primary source because it contains first-hand findings and data. Importance of primary sources. Primary sources provide direct evidence and authentic information. They enable researchers to analyze original data, form independent conclusions, and conduct in-depth investigations. Secondary sources. Meaning and definition. Secondary sources are documents that interpret, analyze, evaluate, or summarize information obtained from primary sources. They do not present original information but provide explanations and interpretations of existing knowledge. Secondary sources help readers understand, evaluate, and contextualize information contained in primary sources. Characteristics of secondary sources. Based on primary sources. Provide analysis, interpretation, or commentary. Explain and evaluate original information. Often written after the occurrence of an event or completion of research. Useful for gaining deeper understanding of a topic. Examples of secondary sources. Review articles. Textbooks. Biographies. Critical essays. Scholarly commentaries. Historical analyses. Literature reviews. Book reviews. Example: a review article summarizing and analyzing findings from several research studies on climate change is a secondary source. Importance of secondary sources. Secondary sources help users understand complex information by providing interpretation and context. They support learning, research, and critical analysis by synthesizing information from multiple primary sources. Tertiary sources. Meaning and definition. Tertiary sources are compilations and summaries of information derived from primary and secondary sources. They provide a broad overview of a subject and are primarily intended for quick reference and general understanding. Tertiary sources do not contain original research or detailed analysis but organize existing knowledge in a concise and accessible manner. Characteristics of tertiary sources. Derived from primary and secondary sources. Present summarized and condensed information. Arranged systematically for easy consultation. Designed for quick reference and background study. Provide general rather than detailed information. Examples of tertiary sources. Encyclopedias. Dictionaries. Almanacs. Yearbooks. Directories. Handbooks. Manuals. Fact books. Example: An encyclopedia article on global warming summarizes information from numerous research studies and publications, making it a tertiary source. Importance of tertiary sources. Tertiary sources provide quick access to basic information and background knowledge. They save time by presenting organized and concise information and often guide users to more detailed primary and secondary sources. Differences between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Understanding the differences between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources is essential in research because each type serves a distinct purpose in the process of gathering and using information. These sources differ in terms of the originality of the information they contain, their purpose, the level of analysis they provide, and the depth of detail they offer. Primary sources are the original and first-hand records of information or events. They present evidence directly from the creator without interpretation or analysis by others. The main purpose of primary sources is to provide original data, observations, or findings that researchers can analyze and interpret themselves. Because they contain raw and unprocessed information, they offer the highest level of detail and are considered the most authentic sources of evidence in research. Examples of primary sources include original research articles, laboratory reports, survey data, interviews, diaries, letters, official documents, and historical records. Secondary sources are created by interpreting, analyzing, or evaluating information obtained from primary sources. Rather than presenting new evidence, they explain, discuss, compare, or critique original research and events. Their purpose is to help readers understand the significance of primary information by placing it into context or synthesizing findings from multiple studies. Secondary sources provide a moderate level of detail because they summarize and interpret existing knowledge rather than presenting original data. Common examples include textbooks, review articles, scholarly books, biographies, literature reviews, and critical essays. Tertiary sources are compilations and summaries of information drawn from both primary and secondary sources. They are designed to provide a broad overview of a topic and serve as quick reference materials rather than detailed research evidence. Tertiary sources organize and condense existing knowledge into an easily accessible format, making them useful for gaining a basic understanding of a subject or locating additional sources. They generally provide the least amount of detail and are not intended for in-depth analysis. Examples include encyclopedias, dictionaries, almanacs, handbooks, directories, and indexes. In summary, primary sources provide original and first-hand evidence, secondary sources interpret and analyze that evidence, while tertiary sources summarize and compile information from both primary and secondary sources to offer a general overview. Researchers often begin with tertiary sources to understand a topic, consult secondary sources to gain expert analysis, and finally rely on primary sources for the most reliable and original evidence when conducting academic research. Role in libraries. Libraries maintain collections of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources to meet diverse information needs. Primary sources support advanced research and scholarly investigations. Secondary sources assist users in understanding and interpreting original information. Tertiary sources provide quick answers, background information, and guidance to additional resources. Librarians use tertiary sources as starting points and direct users toward relevant secondary and primary sources for more detailed study. Conclusion. Reference sources are fundamental tools for information access and retrieval. Primary sources provide original and authentic evidence. Secondary sources offer interpretation and analysis, and tertiary sources supply concise summaries and background information. Together, these three categories form an integrated information system that supports learning, teaching, research, and decision-making. Understanding their differences and uses enables users to locate and utilize information effectively and efficiently.